stock market crashed in late 1929, it didn't immediately lead to the Great Depression. Sure, a lot of rich people lost a lot of money. But remember, only about 3% of Americans actually owned stock at the time. And while the markets lost value, they didn't completely crash and burn. They started to recover a bit in 1930, before going back down again in 1931 when the economy truly sank into depression. But that's where things get complicated. You can't really say the stock market crash was the cause of the depression. A lot of it had to do with systemic economic issues, like the agricultural crisis, the rise of debt, and, above all, a lack of banking regulation. So, if we're looking for a root cause of the Great Depression, we need to look at something bigger than the stock market. We need to look at the banking system. In the 1920s, the US had a weak banking system. Sure, there was the Federal Reserve, created in 1913, but most of the banks in the US were small, local institutions that were really just winging it without much oversight. When the stock market crashed and people panicked, they rushed to withdraw their money from banks. And because the banks didn't have enough money in reserves, they went under. This set off a chain reaction of bank failures. In 1930, it started in Louisville and spread to other states, including Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and more. And as the banks failed, they called in loans from businesses, forcing even more businesses to collapse. Credit froze up, and when credit freezes, the economy freezes. There wasn't any more money circulating, and people couldn't buy goods or pay workers. And here's where things got really bad. When money becomes scarce, prices start to drop. This is what we call deflation. Now, I know what you're thinking. Deflation sounds good. Lower prices mean I can buy stuff for cheap. And you're right, on the surface, that sounds great. But here's the problem. When prices drop, businesses can't make a profit. To cope, they start laying off workers. Those workers, in turn, can't buy anything, and inventories start piling up. More businesses fail, and so the cycle continues. This is what really set the Great Depression in motion. A frozen credit system, massive deflation, and widespread unemployment. It created a downward spiral that was hard to stop. Now, you might be wondering, what did Hoover do to fix the problem? The short answer is, not much. The long answer is, not much at first. Hoover's philosophy was that the economy would correct itself if left alone. His response to the economic collapse was essentially a belief in voluntary cooperation. He urged businesses to keep wages high and workers employed without government interference. But that just didn't work in a time of massive deflation. So, why didn't Hoover do more to jumpstart the economy? Well, let's take a quick detour and talk about economic theory. Back then, economists didn't really have the tools or understanding to fight a depression like this one. Enter John Maynard Keynes. In 1936, Keynes published The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, a book with a title even longer than this sentence, which explained that during a depression, the government should step in with big infrastructure projects to pump money into the economy. But at the time, Hoover didn't have the benefit of Keynesian economics to guide his decisions. Instead, Hoover did push for a few reforms, like the creation of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, RFC, which loaned money to banks and businesses to try to stop the bleeding. But by then, the damage had already been done. The economy was in freefall, and more Americans were slipping into poverty every day. As we all know, the Great Depression wasn't just an American problem, it was a global one. After World War I, European countries were already deep in debt. Germany, in particular, was saddled with huge reparations under the Versailles Treaty, which required them to pay $33 billion to France and Britain. But Germany couldn't pay these reparations without borrowing money from American banks. And so when the US economy crashed, American banks stopped lending, and Germany couldn't pay back the debt. France and Britain, who were also struggling, couldn't pay back their debts to the US either. This created a domino effect across the globe. As European economies tanked, they couldn't buy American goods, and trade ground to a halt. In a misguided attempt to protect American businesses, the U.S. passed the Hawley-Smoot Tariff in 1930, which raised tariffs to record levels. This only made things worse, as other countries retaliated by raising their own tariffs, and global trade collapsed. By the time the Great Depression ended, in the late 1930s, more than 15 million Americans were unemployed. 1 in 4 people had lost their job. Tens of thousands of banks had failed, and the economy had shrunk by about a third. And yet, despite all the suffering, the Great Depression didn't last forever. The U.S. economy began to recover during World War II, as the war effort created jobs and rebuilt industry. But the damage had already been done, and the Great Depression changed the way Americans thought about the role of government in the economy. It laid the groundwork for the New Deal policies of Franklin D. Roosevelt, which included the creation of Social Security, unemployment insurance, and major public works programs. Roosevelt's administration fundamentally reshaped the relationship between the government and the American people. So, what does all of this mean? The Great Depression wasn't caused by a single event, nor did it have one simple solution. It was the result of a combination of factors: overconfidence in the economy, an unstable banking system, a global financial crisis, and, of course, human error. But perhaps more than anything else, it showed us just how fragile our economic system can be. Well, what can we say? Better to pray and hope it doesn't come to that in the near future. If you enjoyed watching this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and also, if you're new here, you can hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. And we'll see you next time.